Good evening, and thank you all for joining us tonight for the City of Hudson and its River discussions of excerpts from the library's oral history collections. I'm Emily Shemidas, the director of the Hudson Area Library, and I'm joined tonight by Tracy Robinson, our program director, Gary Sheffer, a library trustee and the chair of our History Room committee, and guests Leo Bauer and Peter Tenerowicz, who Gary will be introducing shortly. Thank you to Brenda Schufelt, our History Room coordinator, and Gary for curating tonight's program, and library team member Teddy Azinga for their work preparing the clips for tonight. Our library and its history room are dedicated to preserving and making accessible the history of Hudson, Greenport, and Stockport, our library's service areas. To learn more about our history room collections and services, please visit our new history room website, historyroom.hudsonarealibrary.org, which Tracy will put in the chat. We also have a special shop on the website which features some unique items available for purchase, the proceeds of which support the continued work of our History Room team in collecting, preserving, and celebrating local history. Items available in the shop include the flyers of the Hudson poster that you are viewing right now.
So tonight we are sharing clips from two oral history collections which are part of our History Room archives. The first is the BLACC Legacy Association of Columbia County collection, which was gathered in the late 1980s by members of the Columbia County Retired Senior Volunteer Program, known as RSVP, which was sponsored by Columbia Opportunities, and it was conducted in collaboration with the BLACC Legacy Association of Columbia County. Columbia Opportunities generously donated this collection to our library back in 2018, at which point we began the work of digitizing, organizing, and archiving the collection. The second collection we will be featuring clips from tonight is a collection of oral histories recorded by the libraries for the library's oral history collection, including ones conducted by alumni of our longtime partner organization, Oral History Summer School, and others collected by participants in a workshop led by Suzanne Snyder, Oral History Summer School's founder and director, back in 2013. We were awarded a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services in 2019 for a community memory project in collaboration with Oral History Summer School to create interplay between art collections and the Oral History Summer School collection. And we're very grateful to IMLS for their support and to Oral History Summer School for their ongoing partnership. As part of this grant-funded project, we are developing websites for these special collections. The first and largest of these sites is the Oral History Summer School's Community Library of Voice and Sound, which they launched last year. And we encourage everyone to check it out at libraryofvoiceandsound.org. Again, Tracy will post the link in the chat, and you can also link to it from our History Room page if you forget to grab the link tonight. The sites for the collections featured this evening are in development, and we look forward to launching them soon. We're excited in the meantime to share clips from these collections through public listening events, such as this one. So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Gary, who will introduce tonight's program and our guests.
Thanks, Emily. And as Emily mentioned, I'm Gary Sheffer, and trustee of the library and chair of our History Room. You know, during the pandemic, I've been doing interviews on Zoom that we've called the History Room on Zoom. And so I guess this is a special live version of that program. This evening, we're going to hear from Bernice Cross, Beulah Whitbeck, Marie Parker, Ethel Lovelace, Otelia Rainier, and who were all interviewed as part of the BLACC Legacy Association of Columbia County project that Emily just mentioned. From the library's Oral History Project collection, we are going to see and hear recordings from Art Smith, Carmen Cianchetta, Leo Bauer, and Mary Hollenbeck. They were interviewed about a decade ago by participants of the summer school project. In addition to the IMLS grant that Emily mentioned, this event is also supported by a grant from the Fund for Columbia County of the Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation. We're grateful for their support. Okay, let's get started. First, I want to introduce you to our panelists, Leo Bauer and Peter Tenerowicz. Leo and Peter, could you please introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'm Pete Tenerowicz. I'm a lifelong resident of Hudson and Greenport. I've been a member for many years of the Hudson Powerboat Association. Also a member of the Hudson River Historic Boat Restoration, which owns the sloop Eleanor. I'm also a member of Clearwater, and I sail regularly on the river, and seems like I'm there almost every day, either doing some boat club business or walking my dogs. So the river's a big part of my life.
Thank you, Peter. Leo.
Me and my father were the fishermen of the river. We're the Shantytown people. And we used to go out for the shad and the herring. And then we used to smoke them in a smoker down the river and that. So my heritage is Shantytown, and the Hudson River. We had a place over on the island. So the river's a big part of my life.
Thanks, Leo. Leo was featured recently in a Times Union story about the shad fishery and attempts to rehabilitate it. So it was a terrific story. All right, let's get started. Before I jump into the clips, I want to say something about the river itself. It's been a big part of my life, both personally and professionally, and I love learning about it. The Hudson is one of the most important and endangered rivers in the world, with a rich history. We're a library, after all, so if you're looking for a good book about the Hudson, I'd suggest The Hudson, A History by an author named Tom Lewis. That's The Hudson, A History. Really terrific book on the river. However, tonight, we won't be going back to Henry Hudson, the proprietors, the whalers, or the original inhabitants of this area, the Mohicans. Instead, we'll be hearing people's memories recorded over the last 40 years about their personal interactions with the river. We'd also love to hear from you. If you have a comment, please put it in the chat or hold it for the question and answer session we'll have at the end of our discussion. From the 14 interviews you will see and hear this evening, we selected 4 themes, the first of which is the Hudson River in winter. These clips you're about to see total about 8 minutes. You're going to hear from the following people in this segment. Bernice Cross, who was born in Maryland and came to Hudson when she was three months old. Bernice spent most of her life as a cook at the Martin Residence and the Home for the Aged. Ethel Lovelace moved to Hudson from New York City when she was 1 year old. Her great-grandmother, Annie, was enslaved and was a poet. Her mother had a chicken shack business in the basement of 346 to 348 Columbia Street. Beulah Whitbeck, who was born in a house on Spring Street in Hudson. Later, her family moved to Partition Street. She belonged to the AME Zion Church on 2nd Street in Hudson. Her parents were the first Black couple married in that church. Otelia Rainier, who spent her childhood in Virginia, moved to Brooklyn and then to Hudson in 1965. She was a cosmetology teacher at the Hudson Training School for Girls. Art Smith, who was born and grew up in Hudson, he joined the Navy and worked for the Niagara Mohawk Power Company, and his father worked for Gifford Wood Company, which you'll see in his clip. Mary Hollenbeck was born in Cloverk in 1930 and worked at Columbia Memorial Hospital and was involved in with the Hudson Historic Preservation Commission and Historic Hudson. So let's go to that first set of 8 clips about Hudson River in wintertime.
When, of course, in the summertime, you have the fresh fruits, I suppose, like peaches.
Yeah,
and,
I made a lot of peach ice cream.
And I'll bet that was good. And strawberries, when you had strawberry season. Oh, and then you had a great big, what, the big kind of ice cream?
Ours wasn't, but we had one that was a 1 gallon, and we had the 2 gallon freezer, about that high. About that.
And how did you get it cold? Did you have?
We got ice from the iceman when the iceman come along.
Uh-huh.
And used the salt, and the kids would churn it.
Then you chop the ice to put it into the
Yes,
ice.
if we didn't have money enough to get the iceman to run it through,
Yes.
then we got a block, and then they
We
chopped
had a
it.
pick to pick it.
Yeah.
Oh, and then you chopped it down. I see. Oh, so everything.
No, we didn't have refrigerators either. We had ice boxes.
Uh-huh.
We had ice boxes, and you used to put a sign in the window for Mr. Cohen. It was red, blue, yellow, and white.
Oh.
And you used to put a sign in the window for Mr. Cohen, and that sign would tell him how much ice you wanted. And
Oh,
he
I
would
see.
leave the ice in a block.
Oh.
They came in a, I don't know what you call it, but they lift the ice.
Yes.
No, they didn't have, they had ice boxes.
Uh-huh.
Ice boxes. I heard someone talking about that on the television or the radio the other day.
Oh, my
about
goodness.
those old time ice boxes.
Oh, yes.
They knew just how much to leave by whatever you put in the
sign.
window.
Oh.
Yeah, they had ice boxes.
Was there a lot of fishing?
Oh,
back then?
yes. Oh, yes. This man across here, this neighbor across the street, he's probably going now. He goes out, takes his, he's got a thing to swirl around in the ice, you know, and he goes down and gets these, and catches them. He goes every day, fishes through the ice. Neighbor across the street here. And, but yeah, they used to do it an awful lot. Then there used to be ice. They used to get ice off the river. That's how they filled the ice houses.
Really?
You didn't have no ice boxes. Sure, they used to go right down here and cut the ice on the river.
Wow.
They did. They really did. Yes.
That's how everybody kept their.
Yes.
Cool,
Well,
cool.
when we first moved up here, the first year, we walked across the Hudson River. 5 of us. Because we wanted to show the
Walked
people.
across
We
the Hudson
walked
River?
across the Hudson River. We did. And I got pictures of it. And then I sent them back down to Maryland so they could see it. It was 32 below. 32 below zero. And
What y'all doing walking across the river?
to show the people that we could walk across the Hudson River. Because we didn't have the bridge then, see?
Mm-hmm.
And if you, in order to get to Catskill, you had to go
Across the river?
go to Albany, then come down.
Oh, really?
To get to Catskill.
Wow.
Yes. Yes, that's the truth. It was 1932. We walked across the Hudson River. Yeah, my husband and my 3 brothers and I. My 2 brothers and I. Yes, sir. I took pictures of it. Yes, sir. Yes, in the backyard. Then an ice house. They had an ice house. A man would come deliver ice just like now. He would deliver it every day. To people. You could see him carrying this ice.
How much did it cost?
I don't remember, to tell you the truth now, what it cost, but they used to deliver ice. And that ice would last, where they had it, would last until all summer.
Where'd you put it?
They had ice houses. They had, they built this thing like underground, like, and with a cover over it, but that's how they kept this place. And they had to put on heavy clothes to work in there. The men would have to wear, heavy underwear and shoes and boots and things to work in this place because it was so cold. But in order to keep it, to keep it, because that's the only way they had to keep the refrigerator. They didn't have no ice boxes.
So how'd you keep? How'd you keep your food cold? Just a
In this ice box, you put this great big piece. You get this ice and put it in this ice box. It was a regular your machine wasn't a regular refrigerator. It was a regular ice box. Then you put your food around.
You've got the river, and it must get frozen over, but nobody skated on it.
Yes, they skated on it, and then they cut ice on it. They cut the ice.
Oh, I see. Was there an ice house nearby?
Yeah, there was an ice house down there by the river.
And how did you get the ice from the ice house to your house?
Men came around in the street delivering ice.
Oh, did they just bring it into the house and put it in something?
In your ice box.
An ice box. Ah. Now, for a lot of children who may not know what an ice box is.
That's an old-fashioned one. The top opened up and you put the ice in there. You would get a 10-cent chunk, 20-cent chunk, you sold it by the chunk.
Uh-huh. And then this would chill the food.
Yeah.
And did you ever have homemade ice cream when you were a kid? Do you remember making homemade ice cream?
Oh, yes.
And did you ever remember having to churn it or turn it?
No, my brothers did that.
Uh-huh. Because that's sort of a hard job.
It is a hard job.
For kids who've never made ice cream before, could you tell them how your brother sort of did this? Did he turn a handle?
They turned the handle, yes, I know, and they had to put salt in on the ice, I know that.
Ah, okay. Do you remember what flavor it was?
Mostly vanilla.
In the winter, they would go on skating across the Hudson to the Catskill side in the winter, and this was an annual
On the
thing.
ice?
On the ice across the Hudson.
Oh, boy.
I don't know if I would have joined in on that, but anyway,
I
that's what they did. But the wagons and horse and wagon teams used to go across on the ice.
And it was that thick and sturdy.
And we're talking about how cold it is now. It must have been colder than that because it doesn't freeze that deep anymore.
That's right.
It doesn't freeze that deep anymore. But she said they would go
I'll
across.
be darned.
And she showed me crossings. Mrs. Pollard showed me crossings.
Oh, for
that
goodness
they go down and
sakes.
go across to the Catskill
Huh.
side. And teams of horses. I said, you walked across? She said, yeah, we skated across. She said the teams of horses were going across. Why not?
That would support you then,
And
that's for sure.
That's it. And so they talked about that.
The Gifford Wood Company was a big machine shop. They manufactured ice-making machinery, and they had a lot of metal-working machinery there, lathes and huge big cutters, and they had a forge where they cast things, they assembled things, and everything. All these machines were run off of a what's called a jackstaff. It was a shaft that went the whole length of the machine shop, had pulleys on it, and each different size pulleys ran different machines at different speeds, and that was run by a steam engine. And so they wanted to convert that to electricity. So that's how my father went to work there, and he went to work as a foreman and as an electrician, and stayed there for about 45 years.
They never did much on the river when we were growing up in the winter time. But I know when my father's youth, and my mother, they used to skate a lot on the river when it froze over. And they would walk back and forth to Athens on the river. And my aunt, whose husband had a livery stable at the time, used to race horses on the river in the winter. And then, of course, ice harvesting way back then was a big thing because there weren't refrigerators. They really had ice boxes. And for such a long time, my mother used to call the refrigerator the ice box. And I'm trying to figure, why is she calling this an ice box, you know? And then it dawned on me, because they used to use blocks of ice for refrigeration purposes.
So, Leo, you're a fisherman, and you spend a lot of time on the river in the summer. Did you go out on the river in the winter?
No. Only thing we used to go on is in the bay, when the bay was frozen and when the water went out. Some of the ice was very thick and some areas wasn't, and we used to ice skate down in the bay by Shantytown.
Okay.
And then one time we were walking down and I fell through and I thought it was water, and I started, but the tide was already out, so I was saved. So, but go out on the river? No.
Okay. Yeah, because
that'd be kind of crazy. And I don't, and in our time, well, quite a wild time, most of the time boats went up and down, so it wasn't constantly frozen like it was back then, because you didn't have a lot of ships going up and down, and that. So
yeah, Peter and I were talking about that earlier, Leo, about the commercial traffic on this side of the river, the Hudson side, and the Coast Guard icebreakers that go through every now and then. My dad used to tell me, Ken Sheffer, that he used to walk across the river in the wintertime, and I used to think he was crazy, but I guess it really happened that folks would go back and forth.
tell you what, I always wanted to try it, but I didn't get up the nerve to. the people on Athens sides are my friends because we all hung out at the island and that. They used to walk over a lot because on that side, the ships didn't go up and down. So from Athens to the middle flats, they used to walk over and go there. So.
We actually, I live just south of town in Greenport, and my mom is still around, so she's eventually going to see this, and she's not going to want to know that we used to walk out on the ice, cross the river, walk out on the ice, walk along the riprap along the railroad tracks, and pick up rocks, or chunks of ice, and skid them out to see how far they could go out. One day, we actually decided we'd walk out towards the lighthouse as far as the channel was cut. And when you get out there, it's all like a rock mound of ice that's all frozen.
Yeah.
Started climbing on that to see if we could see the open water. And one of the kids' legs went right in the water.
Ooh.
Right down to his waist. Well, we were panicked, obviously. We pulled that kid out and we ran and made it back just south of town where that iron bridge goes over the South Bay.
Wow.
Ran
Peter,
home, and the big fear was not telling our parents.
I think I told you before too, my dad, we'd go swimming in the river, and he told me that later in life that's why I didn't have any hair. I went, swimming in the river, and it was.
I'm going to investigate that, Gary.
Yeah, exactly. So during its bad times, it's just 1960s when the river was so polluted. Peter,
Right.
One of the things that struck me about this is that you're out on the river every day, pretty much, in some fashion, or down at the river. And I hearing these interviews, it seemed like people had more access to the river or were more directly engaged with the river than they are now. You don't, in the summertime, you see some kayakers and boaters and that kind of thing, but it seems like there was more engagement with the river from the generation that we just heard from. Is that true, do you think?
I would probably not think that our riverfront has been largely industrial my whole lifetime, up to the late 1960s. And I mean completely industrial. When the boat club bought their property from the Dayline, that was the first non-industrial use of the waterfront until the boat launch was built in 1968. So that was a real big deal. The waterfront park wasn't built until the year 2000. And there was a lot of dilapidated buildings, industry. There was a car crusher. There was it wasn't a user-friendly area at all. And the people turned their back on the river in a way. They took their life inland. And,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people,
it's all changing
now. And people always said because it's so polluted. I used to tell them, because when people make fun of my river, because I call it my river, and I would say to them, I said, well, it's all right. Just once in a while I glow at night, but other than that, it's all right. Because people make fun of the river because we swam in it. None of us had anything. I said, people that swam in Oakdale got all kinds of wingworm, different things. And we swam in the river all them years and nothing happened to us.
Except
I got a picture of the boat club when the ice came down there in '96 and wrecked the boat club.
Oh, yeah.
I got some nice pictures. Yeah, I got some real nice pictures.
Well, swimming in the river, Leo, which you've talked about in one of your interviews, is it surprises some people that it's a tidal river, at least up to the federal dam at Troy. And there's a nice current as well, too. So when you jump in the river, you better know how to swim, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We used to swim across. We used to go with the tide. So when we knew we'd end up on the island. So then when we swam back, if the current's going the other way, we'd go way up at the other end of the island. By the time we got across, we'd be almost where we had to be because the current's very strong.
Yes.
You have to be a good swimmer. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a
beach. My
beach.
mother knew all the things like his mother. I would never be sitting down.
There's a beach on the north side of the island, the middle ground flats, that a lot of people to this day beach small boats or anchor them and they spend the day there. But if you're going to swim in the river, I crewed on the Clearwater quite a few times, and I figured they knew if it was clean enough to swim in, and they always threw a rope out with a big boat fender or a float on it, and everybody jumped into the river up current from that rope, and then they swam down to the rope, pulled themselves back to the boat, climbed up the ladder and did it again. So otherwise you were going for a ride. So got to beware.
Yeah. Now that middle flats, that island is dredge spoils, right? Is they deepened the channel and they dumped it there. So that's in the middle of the last century, right? I think it was that long ago.
That's the reason the lighthouse is there. The lighthouse was built in 1874, and the flats were true flats. They would have been covered with water at high tide and not visible to the ships, to the shipping.
Nope.
You know, so they actually had a cut through from Hudson to Athens. The old timers cut through the island, and that's where they would run their ferry boat across. And there's still a little dip in the tree line.
You could still see where the split is, because back in the 60s and 70s, you could go between that split with boats, but not no more.
Right.
And that would take you right to Athens. And that's where the ferry sometimes used to go before it went around the island.
That's correct.
When was that ferry between Hudson and Athens, which is, we're going to talk about some boats in our next segment. When did that stop? Do you know when the ferry?
I don't.
Well,
that date, I don't know.
My mother took the ferry to Athens to work during World War II.
Okay.
The Rip Van Winkle Bridge was built in 1935. But when she was in high school, she used to work at the Athens playground. And she used to walk down from Greenport or hitch a ride with a bakery truck to the ferry boat. The bakery truck went across the river to Athens on the ferry with my mother on it. And that's when she went to work. And there was a lot of back and forth from Athens to Hudson. I don't know if that was because of the war and there was gas rationing and they kept the ferry going. I don't know. But it was going until World War II anyway.
Excellent.
Yeah. Used to be 40 cents for a car and a person.
Okay, that's terrific. So that's the Hudson River in winter. I was impressed, those, how exacting that ice cutting was. I don't know if you could see the lines where
there's still a pretty big brick stack south of Hudson on the Greene County side, about a mile south of the lighthouse. It's a big brick smokestack. That's where a coal-fired steam engine used to be in an ice house. Run the conveyor. So that stack is still there, very visible.
And Gary, I worked at Gifford Woods also.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I got a lot of pictures of their tools and stuff like that, negatives and different things of when they did the ice picks, the tongs and stuff. And I have some pictures of inside the building when way back in the probably early 1900s of people working.
Well, the photo that you saw, for the folks who have joined us in that clip about the river, the ice work, that Gifford Wood ad that you saw is from our city directory collection. And you find a lot of Gifford Wood ads in those books going back over the years, and a lot of ads for ice cutting implements.
Well, you got to remember Columbia Street, the one section was Gifford Place. It was named after the Gifford people.
Exactly. That's right. Yep. Okay. So let's switch topics now. And our next section, as I mentioned, is about the Dayliners, the boats that used to go up and down the river in the last century, Albany to New York, stopping here. And we're going to hear 3 clips here about those boats from Ethel Lovelace, who you saw in the first section, Mary Hollenbeck as well, who was in the first section, and a new face, Carmen Cianchetta, who was born in Hudson and took over Raoul's studio and continued that photography business into the 1980s. So let's go to the clips about the Hudson Dayliners.
Do you ever remember a boat, the Dayliner, that went up and down the Hudson?
Yes, but I'm trying to think now. The Dayline we would take the day line, but the day line that I remember that we used to come up from New York and come up as far as Bear Mountain, but there was a day line boat here that would go to Albany.
Oh.
That's as far as I remember going on that boat.
Uh-huh.
But there was a boat that came up and you went to Albany.
Which would be fun.
Yes, it was a lot of fun. And I don't remember anything about it except that we went on it.
Oh.
Because I love boat rides. In fact, in New York, we used to always go on the day line.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the churches used to sponsor a lot of picnics to Bear Mountain and use the day line boat.
Yeah, so that the whole congregation could go.
Yes.
And families would go as a group.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other thing we used to have, which they don't have anymore, is a day boat. Well, they called it a day boat because they used to have a night boat on the river too, but its name was the day boat. And it ran from Albany to New York with various stops on the river along the way, and Hudson was one of the stops. So that was the thing we did in the summer, take a ride on the day boat. And there, at Kingston, there was an amusement park called Kingston Point where a lot of people went from Hudson to Kingston Point and, you know, got off there and spent the day and then took the upboat back home. And, or we used to take the boat to Poughkeepsie and get off at Poughkeepsie and then take the train home. Because if we went on the boat, you could see all the big estates along the river, which you can't see by car. You can see the entrances like to Vanderbilt and Astor and all those places, but you can't really see them unless you go in on the grounds. But if you're on a boat, you can see them. And that was one of the reasons that we used to do that. And then, like I say, we take the train back to Hudson. And one time, my mother took my girlfriend and me on the boat, and we were in the bow of the boat, sailing down the river. We got to the Rip and Winkle Bridge. Well, as you're coming down, it looked, you know, illusion. It looks as though the flagpole's going to run into the bridge. You don't realize the distance between the river and the bridge. So we were looking at that flagpole and we were thinking, oh, the flagpole going to hit that bridge, and we started to scream, the flagpole's going to hit the bridge. My mother says, will you be quiet? I'm never going to bring the two of you here again. And then the other fun part on those boats was you could go to the room and actually see the steam mechanisms work in the boat. And then you could they sold food. Of course, it was always more expensive, because most people would bring their own picnics or whatever. And, you know, if you went, like I said, to Poughkeepsie, then you'd eat on the boat. And, but if they went to Kingston Point, they'd take their picnic lunches off and, you know, have their picnic, and then get the boat that was on the way back to Albany. And usually, the boat was in Albany by 6 o'clock at night, so, you know, it wasn't dark or anything. And that was always fun. And like I say, you know, well, like Sunday schools, they used to take the kids on a picnic and take them, you know, on the boat. And that was always a summer thing to do.
Did you spend a lot of time by the river when you were younger?
When we were kids, we did, because they used to have a Hudson River day line. Used to run daily trips one would come up from New York in the morning and hit here about 11. And then the other one would leave at Albany in the morning and get down here. And they were big river boats. They had, one was Peter Stuyvesant, one was Alexander Hamilton, they had Washington Irving. What else did they have? They had all 4 or 5 of them. You know, they were capable of carrying 5,000 people. And they used to have a recreation park down at Kingston Point on the river. And you used to be able to get the morning one and take it down there, spend the day and come back up on the afternoon one. My mother did that with us once. But that died out, and then during the war they used them for troop ships. And then after the war, they started to run it again, but it only come up as far as Poughkeepsie and ran down, but I don't think they even do that now.
So, Peter, did you go out on your family? Did they talk about going out on the Dayliners? That's a long time ago, I know.
Yeah, I could remember them talking about going on high school trips, high school class trip, down to Kingston Point, or might have been Bear Mountain, I'm not sure. But that would have been quite a bit before my time on the river.
And what's available today? There's always boat stock down there, and I'm not sure I really know. There's boats that'll take you out on an excursion on the river, right?
That changed last year. The excursion, the tour boat operator left town, so I'm not sure if anything is lined up for this year. I know there's a couple in Kingston that take cruises out onto the river for events or sightseeing, and there's a couple out of Albany also.
Interesting. Now, Peter, you're the Commodore, or the past Commodore, of the Boat Association down there. What kind of boating the members of that association? What are you guys doing in the warm weather out there? You're a sailor, right?
I'm a sailor. We have a few sailboats. They let me join because I have to have a outboard motor on my boat. So I guess technically I can join. Recreational boating. When the boat club started in 1951, it was a lot of do-it-yourself boat builders. They built their boats out of plywood kits, motorized a rowboat or something like that. And as time went by, post-war America, mass production boats became available. The average working guy could have a boat. Before that, maybe a few wealthy citizens could have a boat, but as the 50s, the 60s wore on, the average guy could have a boat, and having it on a dock and forming a boat club. It's not a yacht club, it's a boat club. Became a real popular thing up and down the Hudson River. So
now,
there's
you and I
we're talking boat clubs up and down the river.
You and I were talking before. The boat launch is a popular place for watching the big boats go by. The commercial traffic on the river seems to be these days pretty heavy. I know they move petroleum and other products up and down the river in those boats. Is that a hazard for your members? In other words,
oh, we have to be careful. It's commercial traffic. That's a commercial navigation channel. It's dredged to 32 feet by the Army Corps of Engineers, and it's got an inland buoyage system, and you have to give way to those vessels. Those vessels are what they're called constricted by draft. They can't just go around your little motorboat or sailboat.
Exactly.
And a lot of newcomers to the area are surprised to see commercial traffic.
Yeah.
They'll say, hey, I saw a boat out there. It looked like the kind I saw in the in the Hudson River down in New York City. And yeah, that's probably the same boat. It's on its way to the port of Albany or the port of Rensselaer.
Rensselaer, yeah.
So that's new information to some people, but it's actually what brought the original proprietors to Hudson. They had to come up and with their boats.
What do you think? We've got the train, Amtrak, that runs from Albany and points north down to the city. Is it just not economical to continue things like the Dayliners? It's just easier for to get on the train, and people might resist traveling that way?
Well, you know, the train came up before the Civil War, and then it's been
Yeah.
a battle ever since then with river traffic. There's people try to make a go of some kind of you know, other commercial use of boats, and they come and go. We're not a really you know, a big population area that can sustain some of these things like you can down in below Newburgh and down there, where you have a heavier population of people to draw your customers from.
Exactly.
But I'm glad you mentioned the railroad. You know, the railroad has kind of cut access off to the river on the east side to all the river towns. And we don't enjoy the kind of river access that they do on some parts of the other side of the river. Athens, for example, somewhat undeveloped. I mean, the average working class people have houses right on the river. It's kind of hard to think of that in today's real estate market, but that's what goes on.
Well, I'm always,
we've been hemmed in by the railroad.
Yeah, I'm always surprised because I grew up on this side of the river and seen the tracks that in Athens you can sort of just walk into the river.
That's right.
You know, it's a lot different.
Yeah, people launch kayaks and go fishing and canoes, and yeah, it's much different. Although I think, as Leo could tell you, you get up onto the North Bay, and any kind of a small boat, if you can get it under that bridge, you're in the river.
Yeah, yeah. Leo, did Dayliners, what did your family, your dad ever go out on the Dayliners? And
nope, I don't have any history of the Dayboats and that. Only I have a nice picture of one of the Dayline boats that was given to me by Debbie DeCintio, but that's all I have. I don't have much history on the Dayboats, only what the old timers told me down at the Shantytown. They'd tell me how people would be down by the Dayboats and people would throw money off it, change and that, and people would dive in and get the change. And that's about the only story I have.
Yeah, we're going to hear about that a little bit later in one of the clips, Leo. Yeah. But now, when you were fishing and when you were coming out of the North Bay there, Peter just mentioned you got to go under that little bit of bridge there, you know, so tell us about that, how you got your boats out on the river. It was kind of tricky.
Well, yeah, well, it depends on the tides and stuff. And a lot of times during the summer, you didn't have extra high tides and stuff like that, very immense. So we picked the times that we went out, and we picked the times for the tides. And as everybody knows, the tides change every day. So we just picked that out. And it was a tin boat, and we had the cuddy, a big cuddy on the front, and that's where we stacked the net. So, and the engine we had wasn't a big engine in that, so we could get in and out under the bridge. We had hardly any trouble. When I had my big boat in the bay, a lot of times I had to time it right to get back in, and I have a connection on my windshield. I'd have to take my windshield off, which wasn't fun, and put it in the back to get under sometimes. So that's the only thing about being in the bay at Shantytown. So after I got rid of the big boat, and I stayed with a small tin boat with a steering wheel and a 15 horse on it.
You know, it's I used to work at the Register Star, and one of the things I had to do every day, this is back in the early 1980s, was calculate the tides, the high and the low, and we would publish it in the paper every day, the high and low tides of the river. And I said one time, why are we doing this? Why am I spending time doing this? And the editor said to me, no, people want to know. There's a lot of people who want to know.
And that's what we used to look at. We used to look at it in the paper. Yep.
Exactly.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to our next subject, and it's we're going to hear from Leo here. This segment is about Shantytown, which we've been discussing a little bit, the collection of shacks down by the North Bay. Leo's featured in both of these clips. Leo and I and other folks did a live history room on Zoom on that a while back, and it was a lot of fun. We got a lot of interest in it. So why don't we show that clip, those two clips right now with Leo.
But I didn't go on that side of Shantytown as much. We all stayed on this side, because when you get down off the hill on Front Street, when you head all the way down, there's a road that's straight in, and there's a road goes this way. All ours was on this side, and the other people are on that side. So, but none of the people down there, they didn't belong to the boat club. Not, they all belonged to Shantytown. And like I said, the Mice had a shack on the island. Art had a shack on the island. T.C. Martin, his family had a shanty on the island. I don't know who else had shanties, because they were all up at the other end, at the end of the island, right way up towards that end. And we had our places in the middle of the island, almost right across from Shantytown, just up a little ways. So when they went out with the boats and went over there and that, so, because years and years ago, the island didn't have all the growth it has now, because it got dredged and they put all the sand and stuff up on there to make the channel bigger. Because I got a picture in my photo book in the car when they dredged and put all the stuff up there and that. They told me not to bring the pictures because they didn't want to look at pictures and that. So I didn't know what this was going to be about. So that's why they didn't give me a lot of information. They just said I was going to be interviewed. So I didn't know if they wanted to know about the pictures. So I brought them and kept them in the car. So because I have a photo book of all the old pictures of Hudson and that. Got a nice collection. It took me a lot of years to collect them all. Yeah.
Can you tell me more about what it was like spending time there?
Where, in Shantytown?
Yeah.
That was good, because when the children were little and that, because I got a little tin boat, me and my friend went halves on it and that, and I would take my children up in the bay and teach them how to do the boat with the steering and that. Chris was the funniest. We called him the weed whacker, because he'd run it up on the reefs all the time. Because when you turn the motor this way, it goes the opposite way of your turning it. So that threw him off a lot and stuff like that. But it was nice. And then I took a old the rubber raft things and that, and I tie it on the back of the aluminum boat and that, and then we'd go up in the bay. I wouldn't take them out in the river because it's kind of dangerous, because people drive their boats kind of crazy and people drinking and doing. So I'd ride them up in the bay, and the back of that, and the water would all spray up on them and stuff like that. And the parties, we had a lot of nice parties down there, get-togethers and stuff like that. And it was nice. Always drinking, you know. Drinking was part of Shantytown in its own way and that. But doing the fish was... I think I probably cut up thousands of fish, thousands. I said, you would smell me before you see me, because the smell of the fish. So the only thing to get the smell off you was lemon juice, because the lemon would take it off your hands and your body, because you had to scale them, then you cut them, because you get the shad, on the male you get the shad roll, which is the eggs, and people like that. I didn't like that part of the fish, no. But the smoked, if you like fish, if you ever had the smoked shad, oh, you'd love it. The herring was more bonier, so when we did them, you have to pick through it and that. With the shad, it had bigger bones, so you could take more of them out and then have just the shad there and that, with the smoke and that. And like I said, we took an old Coca-Cola machine and we put a wood box off the side of it, and then that's where we put the wood, and then it smoked the fish up in that. So going out on the river was always fun. Like I said, when I used to come home on State Street, my mother's friends used to say, "Who's that coming?" They say, "Oh, that's your long lost son." Because I always be out on the river with my little tin. We had the little tin boat. They had unique stories, and that's why I wrote the article that's in the Columbia County History and Heritage magazine back in 2010 about some of their stories and that, because they were unique with their stories about Shantytown and Hudson and the prostitution and people trading the fish for the prostitution and stuff, and different things when people came down to the river to try to buy fish off them, especially out on Swinetuck, because Swinetuck was a big person down there too from years ago, Joe Swinetuck. Towards the end, his mind was going, and that he'd be singing and dogging, walking his dog and singing and stuff, but then he passed away. But Shantytown, I tell people live there, because in some of the articles that they write about, they said no one ever lived there. They lived there year round. Chisel, I think, was the toughest guy that lived down there, because he didn't even have a wood floor in his place. It was a dirt floor. He had mattresses piled up, and he slept on the top mattress. And he had an old stove in there, and that's it. And that's the way he lived. He was an old iron worker. Most of the people down there were old iron workers. And iron workers were hard workers, because Yeah, they worked in all kinds of weather and stuff like that. So it was a different class of people.
Leo, so I'm loving the name Chisel. Was that a nickname for this ironworker?
Yeah.
That
Well, all the years I knew Chisel, I never knew his name was Sylvester. And I don't think anybody probably would have called him Sylvester. I said, that's probably why. But I think he got the nickname Chisel because he was hard like a chisel.
Yeah.
He was just a tough old guy. And Ed Walsky was another iron worker down there. He was a tough person. And so was Art Myers. Most of the people that were down there were, iron workers, and a lot of them built Albany, all the scrapers and the high rises
Empire
and
State
stuff
Plaza,
like that.
Yeah. Leo, at its peak, how many shacks down there in the summer? I know a few of them have collapsed, that kind of thing. How many
Probably
were there?
around 21, 22 shanties were down there at one time. But the ones that were past where there's two out in the water, and past there was three other ones that were the mice family, and they all just, if you don't keep them up, the ice takes care of because even with being in the bay, it still gets the big ice. But in the last so many years, you see, we don't get the ice like we used to get it. So that's what took them down. It didn't fix them up. And then there was another one closer to number 6, and that was over the water. And that one fell down probably about 20 years ago, maybe.
So why don't we, as I said, we did the session last year on Shantytown. What's new, Leo, down there? Has anything progressed on? I know you want to build a little bit of a center down there and save some of the shanties and demolish others. So what's the latest down there, Leo?
Well, we talked to the new assistant to the mayor, and he said he was going to try to get some stuff going, but we haven't heard nothing. And that's been the year before. So I don't think that's going anywhere. And what's happening now, the one boat shanty that we really liked a lot, it was probably close to not the oldest down there, but close to it. The ice that we just got, the ice storm that did everybody's driveways and everything, it caved the whole thing in, and so it's lost now. We couldn't fix it if we wanted to. It's just beyond. I fix on some of them, and I'm waiting till the weather breaks, which I'm hoping it breaks soon because it keeps going back and forth. I work on the roofs and do things on them because I'm trying to keep them up, because once roofs leak, that what makes the devastation in that. So, and the ones all in the front, we want to tear all them down, and that would open up the bay. And a friend of mine, he took all the shanties out. He did a picture, and it's so gorgeous from the top of the hill. It opens up the whole bay, and it looks gorgeous. So we have the grant, 150,000, and the guy put the bid in, and that was the end of it. So I haven't talked to nobody from the city in probably over a year now, because nothing gets done anyway. So,
and your goal is you want to preserve, in a few of those out front, the culture, the fishing culture that was not only in Hudson, but in other parts of the river, but through pollution and overfishing and other things has disappeared.
Yeah. And there's no places like that. See, what Hudson never thinks about things ahead of time. That's why it took forever to build a park for Henry Hudson and that, to do even that. And I said, I wonder why they never built nothing. And like Peter said, the train blocked everything off from us and that. But Shantytown could be a good thing. If you ever go to Maine, down by the waterfronts and the river shanties and stuff like that, they got like art studios, different things going on. The one big lockbox is the one that's a newer one down there. That's the one we want to keep as a museum. And I only want to keep about 5 shanties out of all of them, and to keep that history and that. And I told them, the city of Hudson, that would draw people down there, because if you have an art student, different things, you ever go to Maine and you go to Gunkwit, Perkins Cove, all them areas, it's big attraction for people to come. And Hudson, if they would look ahead and see what Shantytown could be for the city of Hudson, but I guess no one sees that. They see a bunch of junky shanties and everybody wants to tear them down. Yeah.
Yeah. Peter, you're with Clearwater, which is an organization that works to restore and protect the Hudson. What's the status of the river from a health standpoint, the health of the river? You know, we all remember the famous, the Hudson River caught fire headlines of the 1960s, et cetera.
Right.
How would you characterize it today?
Oh, I think it's probably as good as it's been in 100 years. The eagles are back. The oxygen levels are up. There's more fish in the river. I know the DEC tries to put limitations on shad and striper fishing. I think Leo knows more about that than I do, but I think the kinds of birds and fish that are around are of a greater variety and probably healthier than they have been. A lot of that's because, yes, because of efforts, the environmental movement, of course, but also deindustrialization. I mean, everything went to China or wherever it went, and it's not in the Hudson Valley anymore. But the Hudson River was everybody's sewer system for a long time.
Exactly.
People didn't care about it. So thankfully, that's all changing. We're still dumping combined sewage overflow into the river from various cities, but I think even the city of Hudson has got some changes happening as far as changing that too. So there are some tough times after big rainstorms. You do not want to put your foot in that river.
Exactly.
What you'll see in there, but like we said earlier, during the summer, people swim in the river. You're not supposed to eat a lot of fish from the river.
There are restrictions, yeah.
Yeah, I think one fish a month if you're not a woman of childbearing age or a child.
Exactly.
But we do see people fishing at the river all the time. A lot of the immigrant community fishes there, like they do in their country that they came from. I hope they're being careful with what they're catching.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are drawn to the river, despite everything that's happened. But it's getting cleaned up. I think the PCBs are still continue to be a problem. I can't give you any specifics on that.
Yeah, it's the main reason why there are still restrictions, the PCB pollution, why there are still restrictions on how many meals you can eat from the river over a particular period of time, meaning fish.
Sure, but the river is it's turbid. You're not gonna, it's like a lake. It's fed by organic matter and streams, so it's not going to look like the waterfront in the Bahamas or something where you can look straight down 10 feet to see the bottom. But that doesn't mean it's really dirty. You can stick your hand in it and it's going to be clean when it comes up. Doesn't smell as much as it used to.
Right.
There's a lot of wildlife in it. People enjoy it, and as they should, and let's hope it keeps getting better.
Yeah, I think, Leo, I really appreciate what Leo said previously, which was the river sort of we turned our back on it. Used to be our back door in some ways with people dumping and that kind of thing. And now it's in many communities become the front door because of its beauty and access to all those resources. Okay, so let's go to our last segment. It's on swimming in the Hudson. It's an interview with Art Smith, and it's going to hit on the boats and something that Leo mentioned previously about kids trying to win their fortune down there when those boats pulled in. So if we go to that last clip with Art Smith.
Yes, my mother, can we go out? Can we go swimming? She'd say, okay. Down the sidewalk we'd go, down a cross street, down to the river, because we had to be there at 11 o'clock. You know why? Because the Dayboat came at 11 o'clock. The Hudson River Dayline came. It was excursion. Are you familiar with that? Okay, it was a big excursion boat. excursion boat. It was a huge big boat. I thought they had some pictures here of it. And it went, the 11 o'clock boat came from Albany, and it went to New York. And it took people on there to New York. It was when it came up in the afternoon, when that one left Albany in the morning, this one left New York about the same time, and they got in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Hudson, and then went on to Albany. Now the reason we wanted to be there was because, are you familiar with down along the riverfront? Have you been down there? You know where the boat club is?
Yeah.
The boat club was the dock for the Hudson River Dayline. Right next to it was the ferry slip. The ferry slip had a ferry in it that went from Hudson to Athens across the river and back all day long in the summertime. There were pilings that went out so that the ferry could come in there. We would climb out on the pilings, and these dayboats were so big that when they docked at what's now the boat club, it extended back and shut off that slip. So we'd get in the water once they were docked, and we'd have people throw money to us. But we had a little saying, throw your nickels, quarters, and dimes, save your pennies for other times. Now, some people would throw nickels or pennies. You also have to realize the Hudson River was very, very, very dirty. Very dirty. And you could barely see, probably. Once you got down 3 or 4 feet, you couldn't see. So you had to get this coin either before it got too far down or you missed it. And every once in a while you'd run into some smart kid on there would throw them at you. And if you ever get hit with a nickel in the head, that kind of stings. So we would get it was called a scramble. We'd get the scramble. Now there were kids that would come down who couldn't swim. The Dayline dock was here. Next to it was a huge big freight house because the Dayline also carried freight along with people. And they had a cinder dock over here. And the kids that couldn't swim would get over there and they'd get people to throw money to them there. After Dayboat left, it was by then be pretty close to 12 o'clock. We'd get out of the water. If we happened to get a couple pennies or something, we'd go up, we'd go down the little street that was there. The street isn't there anymore. And there was a huge big building down there. It used to be an ice house. And on the back side of the ice house, there was a space about 6 feet long, 6 feet wide, and maybe 10 or 12 feet long. All the big kids would get around there and shoot dice with their pennies. Well, if we had a couple pennies, we'd get in a dice game. Of course, we'd always lose. If they wouldn't let us in, we could just walk up to the next street, which was Ferry Street, and that's gone also now. And there were warehouses up there that had cement loading docks in front of them. So we'd get together, we'd each have a few pennies, and we'd get back about 5 feet, and we'd pitch pennies at the loading dock, and whichever came the closest, you got that hand. So we won or lost some money.
Well, that sounds like a kid's paradise, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's swimming in the river, pitching pennies, and playing dice games. That's I don't think the Hudson Youth Bureau would sponsor that these days. I don't know. Leo, were you ever involved in? I know it was before your time a little bit, but it sounds like the river was a playground for a lot of.
Oh, yeah. Well, we used to pitch them on Front Street. We used to pitch the coins against Kawakas, Betty Kawaka and their family. They had a nice cement brick steps to go up. So we used to pitch them there. Pennies. We didn't have not dimes and nickels and all that. We didn't have.
Peter, so how it sounds like it's an adult playground for you now. When did you first begin to go out on the river? You said you got into it because of sailing. How young were you?
My dad was a sailor, a lake sailor from Lake Taconic and Copac Lake. Back then, kids would actually make their own sailboats out of kits, plans that they sent away for a kid's sailing magazine called The Rudder, and learn how to sail. And if you kept with it, well, you went maybe to a bigger body of water. That the only place here is the Hudson. So as an adult, he got a sailboat and kept it over in Catskill Creek, but he did trade that in for a motorboat once the boat launch was built in Hudson, and he could back the boat in with a trailer and be boating, you know. Because very few people, even the boat club today is a time commitment, you know, and a lot of people, a lot of working class people that over the years, they've had a small boat that they can launch from a trailer. And now people getting into kayaking and canoeing or even paddle boards, you know, it doesn't require a big investment of time or place, you know.
A trailer and all that, yeah.
You can be on the water. So we see a lot more, of that. It's been a family activity. People can go out, they bring their kids out to the island, or they tow them around on one of those inflatable rafts up and down the river. A lot of people come to boating through fishing. You know, we rent a portion of our docks out during striper season to local fishermen. So they can have a boat right on the dock during fishing season.
And Peter, when is striper season? When would that be, the height of that?
I'm gonna have to ask Leo to answer that question. I think it ends around.
Well, I think around May or June. The water has to be a little bit warmer for them to come.
For them to come up.
Yeah.
For the future.
A lot of my friends still fish stripers and stuff like that. Even my mechanic down in Germantown and that, Doug and that, he goes out and they catch pretty good sized stripers and that. So the stripers are still doing very well in the Hudson River. But I haven't been out. When they closed Shantytown, I stopped doing things in that because I used to keep my boat in, and I only had to put it in once a year and take it out once a year. So I sold my boat in that. So I don't have a boat anymore.
And Peter, we were talking before about the boat launch. It seems like the state has some plans to upgrade it.
Yeah, pre-pandemic, I went to a meeting where they had some plans to rebuild the boat launch parking lot. Some of that was because it's been flooding more often, and they wanted to put some recreational parts of that, build up some little places to put benches and things like that.
Okay.
I think that's back on track, but I don't know completely where it stands. There's a plan to redo 5 boat launches in the upper Hudson River.
Interesting. Terrific.
I also wanted to add, Gary, if the Hudson River is part of the Great Loop, there's a lot of recreational boaters that do a project called the Great Loop. They come up the Hudson, they go out through the Erie Canal, through the Great Lakes, down the Mississippi River, or an inland river, to the Gulf of Mexico, around to Florida, up the inland waterway, back to New York again. So during the summer, you can see a wide variety of boats coming up and down the river from all over the world, and they're on that journey. And they come up the Lake Champlain Canal, up to Lake Champlain and the St. Lawrence River. So a lot of the boats you see, it's a pretty wide variety along with the commercial traffic. In the waterfront park, you're right there. You don't have to, you're not looking down from a mile or a bridge. You're right next to the boat traffic. So for boating enthusiasts, it's pretty good spot.
Terrific. Well, my mom, boat watching was a major sport for her. She'd park in that boat launch parking lot and watch them go by. She really enjoyed it. So, and we do too now.
Yeah. Well, if you go down there, Gary, and that, and look to your right, I don't know if you've seen it, the eagle's nest straight up in the tree right there. Right now, that because the leaves will be coming soon, but now you can see the nest pretty good, and the eagles are right up in there. I'm not sure if they got young ones because they usually have them early, so they might be even young ones in there or eggs and that, because it looks like they're setting the nest.
I thought that was an eagle's nest, but I didn't know.
Yeah,
that's good to know.
Eagle's nest. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I don't know if anyone of our attendees have any questions. You can raise your hand or put it in the chat before we sign off if anyone has a question. No? Okay. Well, this has been a lot of fun for me, and talking with Leo and Peter is just great fun. And so thank you to both of you for being with us tonight. I want to thank our sponsors and all the folks who put all the work into the history room or into the oral histories, I'm sorry. And as Emily said at the beginning, you know, we've got some a little shop on the history room site. There's some really cool items in there about the history of Hudson. Proceeds go to programs like this. So I hope you'll take a look. And Emily, is there anything else that I should mention before we sign off?
If I bring it up, I can share the next history room event.
Yeah, okay.
Let's see. We have one
I
coming
say
up
one
in
more
April.
thing.
Leo, well, go ahead, Leo.
Well, I want to let people know that where the boat launch is now was the other Shantytown. And if they ever want to look at the pictures that I have, because I have the pictures of the Shantytown down there, and they can contact me at shantytowngoodmemories@gmail.com. That's shantytowngoodmemories@gmail.com.
Thank you.
That's all.
I'm glad you added that, Leo. That's terrific. I'm going to take a look myself.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
So yeah, the next local history program that we have scheduled is next month, Thursday, April 28th at 6 p.m. The information is already up on the History Room website. And it is in partnership with the Jacob Leisler Institute for the Study of Early New York History. And the speaker's name is Dennis Micah. And it is called Reconsidering Slavery in 17th Century New Netherland. What do we know? What can we learn?
Terrific.
So we hope everyone will join us for that. We also have a lot of recordings of past talks on our YouTube page, which you can also link to from the website. I think I just saw a hand, but then I missed where it went. I don't know if that was purposeful.
Okay.
It was an accidental hand raising. And I also saw somebody had asked how was doing the interviewing, and I think only Leo could answer that. How was doing the interviewing? Because none of us did the actual interviewing of the people that were interviewed.
Well, they did it where the library is down on by State Street, the old library there. And they did an interview up in the back upstairs, and that the girl did. And I talked too much. That's what I did, talk too much. I didn't know you guys were going to use this, but they interviewed me, and then they told me, yeah, you did shock me too. And I said, and the girls told Janet, the other lady that worked at the library, he didn't talk a lot. I said, I talked for 2 hours. I said, you'd be tired after 10 minutes. But yeah, it was good. It was good. I'm glad they did it though. So, because I don't want the history of Hudson to go away, and I don't want the history of Shantytown and all the good things that Shantytown did way back in World War II. So that's why.
Great. And then there was also a question of who was doing the interviewing, and there were a mix of interviewers for different interviews. So the Black Legacy Association of Columbia County interviews were primarily done by Marcella Beagle and Grace Schwartzman, although there were some other people that also assisted with that. I know Otelia Rayner, who was one of the interviewees, did some interviewing as well. For the library's oral history collection, there's a large number of different people that have done the interviews. I know the one with Leo was by Jenny Goldberg, who was an alumni of the Oral History Summer School program. I'm trying to remember who did the other ones. I know Robin Waters, who's the former Senior Services Commissioner, did one of them back in 2013. She was a member of a workshop that we offered. So she learned how to do oral histories and then went out and interviewed Mary Hollenbeck for that one. But yeah, I think the other ones that were from our collection were all Jenny Goldberg, I'm pretty sure, aside from Mary
I can't
Hollenbeck.
remember all because I've been Yeah, because I've been interviewed so many times to remember everybody's name and that. And I wanted to tell everybody that ice box they're talking about, I try to get it from my sister. She has one in her dining room where you open it up, it's all galvanized in the top, and you put the ice, and then underneath you had the open doors and that. But she won't give it up. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
everyone
you.
for coming, and thanks Leo and Peter and Gary, of
Yep,
course,
I hope I didn't
and
bore
Tracy on tech
everybody.
support.
Nice seeing you, Leo.